actually, I really am looking forward to hearing from Tamborine Borrelli. Now, Tamborine, Noreen, I don't know if you want to say any more about Tamborine before she comes, but we're really grateful to have you, Tamborine, with us. And so you are running for the Secretary of State. You also are involved with the Washington Election Integrity Coalition. Is that right? Yeah. So I want to hear from you, and this is going to be a pleasure for me. So come forward.
It is my deep honor to be here in this house today and to be with you. You know, there's many churches, but all churches don't have the presence of God as this house has. I have been in many churches, but the minute that I walked into this house, I began to weep. And I couldn't stop. I'm doing my best not to weep now. Since I was a child, the hand of God has been firmly pressed upon my soul. The Spirit of the Lord that resonates within the frequency of truth. I don't know why I was the only child of 5 that my parents sent to a Christian school. I'm the youngest of 5. I never understood that, but I came up under the word of the Lord. And as a child, I had what I now know is the gift of discernment. Because I remember being a child, and I remember telling my mom, and I must have been just this high, saying, they're saying one thing, but they're not telling the truth. They're saying this, but they're feeling that. And since I was a child, I just said it out loud so those that I was speaking about would hear me. And I remember, I'll never forget the look on their face. How does this little kid know what's in my heart? A look of shock, like I had 2 heads or something. And so for that reason, as I became an adult and observed the things of the world, particularly politics, I never lent myself to that, what I perceived to be a circus, because election year after election year, I would look in the faces of these politicians and say, they're lying. Right through their teeth every year, making promises they never intend to keep, lying to the people for their masters. Those, no matter what side of the aisle, whatever letter they have behind their name, serving their masters, and their masters not being the Most High above, whether it be for personal gain or for a globalist agenda. I never got involved because of that. Truth has always been tantamount for me. And so in 2016, I saw what I thought to be a truth teller, someone who seemed to be speaking against what I viewed as the establishment that I always observed to be lying. And I got involved in politics for the first time. I became a Bernie Sanders supporter. Yes, you can go ahead and chuckle. You know, sometimes even those that have discernment can be a little slow on the uptake. But I, looking back, see there was a purpose for that experience, that God led me through that for this time, because within that experience, I got to have a personal experience of politics on the left. I got to experience the deep programming that happens, the agenda of socialism. And I'll ask you, where is God in socialism? Nowhere. Because it is the bait and switch, ultimately, for those who seek to rule us all. That's the intention of socialism. So within that experience, when I believe in something, I'm all in. I became a national delegate for Bernie Sanders. I opened a volunteer campaign office. I ran for state senate as a Democrat. To be clear, I had no love for the Democratic Party, and even more so, they had even less love for me because I was a truth teller and I saw them and they knew it. So in 2016 at the Democratic National Convention, I was there to make sure that Hillary Clinton did not get the nomination because I knew she was evil. In my earnest, thinking Bernie was one thing, but he really was quite another, I was there to fight because God made me to be a warrior for truth and for this time in particular. So there I was, ready, standing up on the chairs, ready to fight for this nomination. And I was recruited by Election Justice USA because they had a 100-page statistical analysis by world-renowned statisticians that proved that Hillary Clinton stole that primary from Bernie, that he actually won. So as God would have it, they approached me as a delegate. The report was given to Sanders and he ignored it because I believe Mr. Sanders already knew. And I believe that was the plan right from the beginning. To be a sheep herder for people like me that wanted nothing to do with the madness and deception of politics, but heard something different in Bernie Sanders. He not only ignored that report, but he gathered all of us delegates into one of those banquet rooms in the hotel. There was 1,000 of us in there from all over the country. And I remember I was standing on one of the chairs, and I'll never forget when he told us that he was conceding. And more than that, not only was he conceding, but then asked us to support the very person we had all loathed. And I remember the feeling of my heart plummeting into my gut. The feeling that you get, we've all had it once at least in our lives, the feeling of betrayal. And I remember thinking, you're exactly what I never wanted to lend myself to. I, for the past year and some change, have dedicated 70 hours a week because I believed you were different. And he took every little penny of our little $27, 200 million to be exact, and gave it to the very establishment, the DNC, that he campaigned against. So that was my experience on the left. And I remember the night that Trump won, I laughed with joy. I was so happy because it's not that they didn't cheat, they just didn't cheat enough, right? Because our election system, and many people know it in their gut, it's been wrong for a long, long time. Those that seek to rule us have perfected the means in which the people have their voice be counted. 2018, I ran as an independent. You know the term walk away. I was halfway walked away. I ran as an independent, took on the Second Amendment to my platform, civil liberties, still hadn't quite understood the consequences of left-leaning policy. But by 2020, I voted for Mr. Donald J. Trump, and I had created Washington Election Integrity Coalition United. It's a lot of words, I know, but I chose those words specifically to create the acronym We See You. And after the election, we documented quite a bit of evidence. We documented verifiable vote flips, for instance. If you paid attention to all of the hearings throughout the country, specifically in Antrim County, Michigan, you might remember them talking about vote flips in 6,000 increments. Here in Washington State, there was a verifiable vote flip of 6,614 votes that went from a third-party candidate. You see a minus there. Now, this is data straight from the Secretary of State. We didn't make it up. And you see a positive in the column of Biden. 37,000 votes on 10 separate occasions moved around. That only happens when they're trying to figure out where they need it, where they need to put it. We have snapshots of election night, the governor's race in particular, at 9:36 p.m. and 43 seconds. The total of the governor's race was over 5,200,000. The problem with that number is that at that moment, that was almost 500,000 votes over the registered voters at that time. At 10:13 p.m. and 43 seconds, the second matters. It's a timestamp, 43 seconds. That tells you that's a direct feed coming from the Secretary of State and election night reporting. it dropped 2 million votes to be more in line with the presidential totals. So for these reasons and many others, we felt justified in, and we had to take 8 counties to court because we do not have a transparent election system. When you have to sue the auditors that are elected to run the people's elections, then you know something is very wrong with that. In addition to those 8 counties we have sued, we sued the governor with what's called a writ of mandamus. It is a compelling document in his capacity as the state executive officer over the Department of Licensing to compel them to stop registering non-citizens automatically with motor voter. It is a scam because we presented evidence of tens of thousands of names, in particular 2 counties where ballots had been accepted in the names of non-citizens. Not only did they not let the Supreme Court hear that, and the video is up on our site, you could see the commissioner, and listening to you today, so many things flashed before my head when you talked about truth and those that suppress it, those that are complicit, looking at evidence and saying, I don't know, this could be anything, and this is baseless. And not only are we not going to let the Supreme Court hear this, but we're going to grant the AG and governor's request to sanction you $28,000. Mind you, our organization, and me in particularly, for the past year and a half, have been maligned, defamed, eviscerated with discredit because they know I'm telling the truth. And I'm telling the truth about every dark place that exists in this state and how they are deceiving the people. And they don't want that. So they have created their own, actually the Republican Party of Washington State. I'll just tell you that the left and the right at the top are in on it together. They've created an election integrity committee. They have put out that I'm the most dangerous person in the state of Washington, that I am a fraud, and that no one is to support our work. So our attorney has to work pro bono because no one will contribute to our work. Since COVID, I have literally lived on the fumes and grace of God. The enemy has come on my land, sabotaged my well. I did not have running water for 3 months, hot water for 4 months, and thank God it was abundance in rain. So I say all of this to say we are in a time that we've read about and been taught about our whole lives. This time between good and evil. And this state, Washington State, is the incubator for election fraud. And why is election fraud so important? And elections in general? Because it is the mechanism the enemy of us all has used to enslave us. Without controlling elections, they could have never shut this state down. They could have never implemented policies that groom our children in the most evil of ways, mandates where you have to choose putting something into your body, the mark of the beast, or lose your means to feed your family. I don't know what's more evil than that. But they could not have done that without this election fraud. So it is my commission. There's no doubt in my mind. I decided to run for Secretary of State because the previous one, who was a Republican, went to go work for a cabinet level position for Joe Biden. If you didn't know before, that's what's called the Uniparty. And just to tell you a little bit about the system that she implemented, mail-in voting started here in Washington State. And so when they did the COVID pandemic, they made it so the whole state had to do that. And why they did that is because there's no chain of custody. There's no way to tell what happened to your vote. They can do anything they will in the shadows, behind closed doors, and no one knows anything about it. The VoteWa system, where your registration is taken, anybody with a name and a birth date could log on to that registration system and print your ballot and vote your ballot. If that ballot is accepted before yours gets there, yours will be rejected. And when you go on to check about the status of your ballot and you see accepted, you are not the wiser. It was not your vote that was accepted. It was a fraudulent vote. So I just want to say that even though I have a strong, I detest politics because it's not rooted in truth. And I was asked, as soon as former Secretary Wyman left, I was asked, you have to run for this office. You have to do it. And I said, I can't do it. I have a farm at home. I've got these 8 lawsuits going. I don't have the bandwidth to do it. And then one morning, about a month later, you know that space where God talks to you before you're awake, but you're not quite asleep. I heard very clearly, these were the words, drastic times. Call for drastic measures. And then the last sentence was, winning is not necessary. In the first hour that I was up, I was like, what? And then it hit me like a brick wall. I have to run for this office. And the purpose is to tell the truth. To tell the truth like no one else is able to tell the truth. From one corner of this state to the next. Because the purpose is to wake the people up. To wake the people up, to let them know how the serpent is planning to enslave us all. We don't have 1 or 2 more elections before they go all the way with this plan that is already underway. We all know it. We've all seen it in the past couple of years. So this race, the Secretary of State has the authority to request legislation to do what? Get rid of mail-in voting. We've got to get rid of mail-in voting. We have got to get rid of these hackable, shamefully so, hackable, vulnerable machines. Our organization put out a press release in November of 2020 breaking the story of massive security breaches to 4 state agencies, the month before the election. For what? They got all the voter data that you need to print ballots. We broke that story, and then Kim Wyman put through, remember I said they can request legislation? She requested HB 1068. That bill was pushed through as an emergency bill to make every vulnerability of election systems exempt from public disclosure. Suppressing the truth. So I could be here for a lot longer because there's so much to educate the people on, but I will close with this. If our elections are fraudulent, many will say, well, then why should we vote? Because they can only do it a certain degree. That's why Trump won in 2016. We must overwhelm the system to overwhelm the fraud. And because I am an election integrity investigator, I know exactly how they're cheating. So we have devised ways, the best that we can, to guard the vote. Starting with, there is a website called dropboxwatch.com that soon you will be able to sign up to be a Dropbox watcher so they know we're watching. None of this stuffing 100 ballots at a time and going to multiple drop boxes. We are having people be citizen watch at the auditor's offices in the middle of the night because they do their business in the dark. We want them to know we're watching you, and every which way that you have taken the people's vote, we will be there watching. One thing, do not vote early. Hold your ballot, because that's how they know what they need to do, the machinations, the chicanery they need to manufacture to make up the numbers they need. You hold your vote, and you vote on election day, and you walk it in. You hand your ballot in, but there's a very important caveat to that. You must check your registration up until that time, because you might find that you've already voted. And if that happens, that's identity theft. So you take your ballot to the auditor, and they'll say, oh, yes, Miss Borrelli, we see you voted before. I said, well, that's impossible. Here's my unopened ballot. You see it's addressed to me. That's my address on my registration. And then you make a report. I know you probably won't remember all of this, so I want you, if you can, and we have cards with the website so that you can just easily go on the website and get all of this information. Lastly, we need to get this truth to as many people as possible because the enemy's working overtime. They've put people into the race to talk election integrity, and they're deceivers. There is only one person that's going to do what needs to be done to set this right, to remove the mechanisms they have for election fraud. And that has been put on my heart by God. I know it. I know it because I'm hated so. I'm reviled so. And I'm persecuted so for that truth. That's why when I walked into this house, it felt like, and I was telling Noreen, because I couldn't stop crying. And it felt like a child that has just been bullied on the playground, but has kept a stiff upper lip because if they saw you cry, they would attack you even more. But when you got home or when your mom came to pick you up and you got into her arms, you just were feeling the safety of that and just let it go. And that's what I felt walking into this house. So I want to thank you all for being and holding the space of God. Because as someone who has never been here, there is no doubt God lives here and in abundance. And I'm sure it has everything to do with the caliber of souls that these two are. It's unmistakable. So I ask your help in getting this truth out. I ask your help. We need to do commercials to get this truth out. If you could tell your friends, doesn't matter, $5, $10, many that give a little, it creates a lot. And I've always hated asking for money, probably from my own unworthiness. We all have issues, but this, I've come to know, has nothing to do with me. This is God's work, God's plan, because this is the land, America, God's land. He created this country, liberty and freedom, the pursuit of happiness, not to be deceived, not to be ruled by those with evil intentions. And that is my purpose for this. So please help us. Please help us. And please get a card when you go out. And please tell as many people as you can. We will try to give as much information as possible that you can email your friends if you're on social media. We have until August 2nd. So again, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and I appreciate your time and listening. Thank you.
I don't know if the battery is going bad here, Josh, but I think I've got about 1 minute here. So thank you, Tamborine. Appreciate you so much. And we hear the earnestness and the import of your cry in your heart. And what would it be like for us to lose our country because the election system was so completely haywire and fraudulent that we essentially didn't have real elections any longer? It looks like we've sort of had that going, or maybe more than sort of, over a period of years, and we are now wise to it. But may the Lord guide us as we respond in our hearts to Tamborine's cry for help and her words directly to us.